Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this expectation of clinical precision. You know, you break your arm, the x-ray shows that jagged white line, and the doctor just points and says, well, there it is.
Right. It's binary.
Exactly. It's broken or it's not broken.
Yeah, the human brain really prefers that kind of visual categorization. I mean, we want our problems to be instantly legible so we can just, apply a standardized fix and move on.
Right. But then you step into the world of complex systemic issues, and suddenly that x-ray machine is completely useless. The diagnostic landscape gets, incredibly murky. It's like, imagine looking at a hospital monitor that says a patient's heart rate is a perfect 60 beats per minute. Their blood pressure is ideal, but the patient themselves is actively passing out on the table right in front of you.
Yeah, diagnostic muddy waters. And that perfectly captures the bizarre reality of the American labor market right now. Because the official monitors, the headline metrics we rely on to judge the health of our economy, they're beaming this message of complete stability. Yet the reality playing out inside corporate headquarters and, well, on your LinkedIn feed, it feels chaotic, contradictory, and deeply unstable.
It really does. So for everyone listening, welcome to this deep dive. Our mission today is to connect the dots between three major, seemingly separate phenomena. We're looking at the recent wave of white-collar layoffs at major corporations, alternative economic metrics that suggest a much, much higher true unemployment rate, and a decades-long collapse in our educational pipeline's ability to produce competent workers.
Yeah.
And we are drawing on a really diverse stack of sources today. We've got Bureau of Labor Statistics data, ShadowStats, corporate layoff reports, standardized testing data from the ACT and PIAAC, and some landmark studies from the National Endowment for the Arts.
Right. And to set the stage here, what looks on the surface like a simple push for corporate efficiency, AI replacing jobs, is actually a desperate, market-driven response to an accelerating deficit in human intellectual capital.
Okay, so let's jump right into this, because you look at the official dashboard, the BLS U3 headline unemployment rate, and we're hovering around, 4.1 to 4.2%?
Yeah, right around there.
Which, historically speaking, any economist will tell you that represents a healthy, full employment economy. By that metric, anyone who wants a job essentially has one.
Right.
And businesses should be humming along with a robust, highly capable workforce.
Exactly. The U3 is the number broadcast on the evening news. It projects total economic calm. It suggests the machine is well-oiled and operating at peak efficiency.
But then you look out the window, or you just check the financial press, because over 205,000 tech and corporate workers have been laid off in recent mass job cuts.
Yeah, it's massive.
We're watching these huge white-collar contractions unfold in real time. Like, look at the sources here. Visa announced they're cutting 2,600 positions. That is roughly 7% of their global staff.
7%.
Yeah. Chime is cutting 10% of its workforce. Robinhood let go of 290 employees. And these aren't failing companies going out of business.
No, not at all.
These are profitable institutions deliberately shedding thousands of highly paid professionals.
And here's the kicker. More than 50% of those corporate restructuring events explicitly cite AI, automation, or task consolidation as the primary driver for the cuts.
Wow.
Which creates a profound cognitive dissonance for the average working professional.
Absolutely. Because the government is telling you unemployment is practically non-existent, but your professional network is just a graveyard of open-to-work banners.
Yeah.
Highly educated people with great resumes are suddenly fighting for their professional lives. And on the surface, I think the immediate reaction is just, oh, greedy corporations are deploying AI to replace humans and save a quick buck.
Right. That's the easy narrative.
But digging into the stack of sources we have today, the reality is far more complex and, honestly, a lot darker.
It is. Because deploying AI to cut payroll, it looks like a simple, ruthless push for efficiency. But it's actually a desperate, market-driven survival tactic. Corporations aren't just adopting AI because a vendor promised them it was the new, shiny toy.
Right.
They're adopting it because the human educational pipeline they have historically relied upon to staff their operations is fundamentally failing to produce people who can do basic foundational work.
Okay, so to understand that claim, we really have to tear down that U3 unemployment metric.
Yeah.
Because 4.1% cannot possibly be the whole story if the pipeline is actually broken.
Right.
The Bureau of Labor Statistics actually tracks broader measures, right? Like the U6 rate, which currently sits at 7.9%.
Yeah.
And that includes people who are underemployed. So maybe you're a graphic designer working 15 hours a week at a coffee shop because you can't find a full-time design role. And it also includes short-term discouraged workers who recently gave up looking.
But see, even the U6 fails to capture the true structural reality of the labor force. To see the actual scope of the dysfunction, we have to look at alternative metrics, specifically the data published by ShadowStats.
Okay, ShadowStats.
Yeah, their calculations evaluate labor underutilization using the criteria the government used prior to 1994. And when you apply those historical standards to today's workforce, the effective unemployment rate skyrockets to roughly 24 to 25%.
Wait, I have a really hard time wrapping my head around a 24% unemployment equivalent. I mean, that is quite literally Great Depression territory.
Yeah.
Does that mean a quarter of the workforce was just fired? Or are you saying there's something fundamentally broken about who is actually available to work?
It's the latter. A 24% real underutilization rate doesn't mean a quarter of the country was suddenly handed a pink slip yesterday. It reveals a slow-motion structural detachment. And to grasp why that ShadowStats number is so high and why it remains a fierce topic of debate among labor economists, you really have to look at a major methodological shift that was implemented by the BLS during the Clinton administration back in 1994.
Okay, so before 1994, how did the government count someone who just couldn't find a job?
So prior to that overhaul, the current population survey, which the Census Bureau conducts for the BLS, they counted discouraged workers very differently.
Okay.
If you were interviewed and you said, I want a job, I'm available to work, but I have completely given up looking because I know there is no work out there for someone with my skills, you were counted in the broader underutilization metrics.
Even if you weren't actively sending out resumes.
Exactly. It didn't matter if you hadn't submitted a resume in 3 years. Your desire to work and your lack of a job kept you in the statistical pool of the potential labor force.
So you were considered a sidelined worker, but still a worker.
Right. But in 1994, the BLS completely redesigned the survey. They instituted a strict behavioral time limit. They decided that if you haven't actively engaged in a specific job search, behavior like sending out a resume or going to an interview within the past 12 months, you are no longer defined as a discouraged worker.
Oh, wow.
You are reclassified entirely out of the labor force. Mathematically, as far as the unemployment rate is concerned, you cease to exist.
So it's like a nightclub bouncer trying to count how many people want to get into a venue?
Yeah.
The U3 rate, that 4.1%, is just the bouncer counting the people actively standing the VIP line right now. The 1994 rule change basically told the bouncer, hey, if someone has been sitting in their car across the street for more than an hour waiting for the line to go down, they don't count as wanting to get in.
That's a great way to look at it.
But ShadowStats is still counting the massive crowds sitting in those cars. They haven't vanished. They just gave up waiting on the official line.
Exactly. And that accumulation of sidelined people over the last 3 decades is what builds up to that 24% baseline. Now, economists will endlessly debate the purity of that number.
Sure.
They'll argue that some of those long-term detached individuals are early retirees, some have taken on caregiving roles, and some rely on disability benefits.
Which is fair.
It is fair.
Yeah.
However, a massive, undeniable portion of that 24% represents millions of working-age adults who have permanently detached from traditional employment because they have been structurally pushed out of the modern economy.
But if the tech economy has been booming for the better part of 2 decades and companies are always talking about a talent shortage, why are millions of working-age adults just permanently sitting in their cars? You'd think they could just reskill or enter the workforce at the ground level.
They remain detached because of a severe systemic skill mismatch. The modern knowledge-based workforce requires a baseline of cognitive flexibility, literacy, and numeracy. And millions of people attempt to enter this workforce and fail, or they simply look at the requirements and never try because they lack the basic foundational skills required to survive in those roles.
Yeah.
I mean, they are fundamentally unemployable in a corporate setting.
Which means we can't just blame the economy. If the jobs exist but the people can't do them, we have to look at the assembly line producing the workers.
Yes.
And looking at the educational data in our sources, this isn't some sudden cliff we fell off because kids had to learn on Zoom for a year in 2020. The warning signs for this incompetence started flashing 30 years ago.
Long before the pandemic and long before the current AI boom, the root of this human capital deficit requires us to look back at the early 2000s, specifically at the work done by the National Endowment for the Arts.
Yeah, the NEA.
Right. Under the chairmanship of Dana Gioia, the NEA published 2 landmark studies that are incredibly prescient today. There was Reading at Risk in 2004 and to read or not to read in 2007.
I have to admit, when I first saw those in the stack for this deep dive, I was confused. Because how does a government study about reading literature from 2004 predict a corporate employment crisis in 2026?
Because the NEA established a long-term catastrophic trend regarding cognitive endurance.
Yeah.
They surveyed thousands of Americans and found that voluntary reading, specifically the reading of literature and long-form complex texts, had been falling steeply for decades across almost all demographic groups.
Okay.
And the 2007 study connected that decline directly to civic engagement and workplace capability.
Because reading a book isn't just a leisure activity, right? It's a cognitive workout.
Precisely the point the NEA was making. Engaging with a complex text requires you to hold multiple variables in your head over hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
It demands sustained attention, the ability to track long logical arguments, and the capacity for deep analytical reasoning.
Which you don't get from scrolling a timeline.
Exactly. When a society stops engaging in that specific type of cognitive exercise, those mental muscles atrophy. The NEA explicitly warned that this erosion of regular reading habits would directly impair the analytical reasoning skills required to function in a modern workplace.
So you lose the ability to sit with a difficult problem, process long-form information, and actually think critically about a solution.
Right.
And we are seeing the exact realization of that 2004 warning right now in our standardized testing data.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the latest ACT National Score Report, the average composite scores have dropped to their lowest level in over 30 years.
The trend lines on objective testing are universally pointing downward. It's accelerating a decline that's been slowly building for a generation.
But the specific statistic from the ACT that absolutely floored me is this. More than 40% of high school seniors met none of the college readiness benchmark.
None of them.
Zero. And to put that in perspective for the listeners, meeting a benchmark on the ACT, which is typically around a 22 in reading or math, means a student has a 50% chance of getting a B or higher in a corresponding first-year college course. Over 40% of seniors couldn't hit that baseline in math, reading, science, or English. Zero benchmarks met.
Which means almost half of all high school graduates are objectively unequipped for entry-level, fundamental college work. And by extension, they are completely unequipped for the cognitive demands of a professional corporate environment.
Yet, if you talk to parents or you look at the report cards coming home from those very same high schools, you see a completely different reality. Everyone is getting A's and B's. High school graduation rates have historically trended upward.
Oh, yeah.
We have pushed college enrollment as the absolute default path for every single student. If everyone is walking across the stage with a high GPA, but 40% of them cannot pass a basic objective reading or math benchmark, what is actually happening inside the schools?
We are witnessing what the Thomas B. Fordham Institute famously identified as the mastery gap.
The mastery gap.
Right. Their research extensively documented that over the past decade, high school grade point averages have been rising steadily, while objective standardized test scores, and not just the ACT, but the SAT and the National Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, are falling or stagnating.
So it's rampant, unchecked grade inflation. We are systematically handing teenagers a piece of paper that declares them proficient and ready for the world, when objective, neutral data proves they are absolutely not.
The diploma has been completely decoupled from academic literacy. The system just passes students along to maintain graduation metrics, regardless of actual skill acquisition. And then, following the default cultural narrative, we send those fundamentally unprepared students to college.
Or they immediately crash into reality.
Exactly. Complete College America published extensive research on what happens next. They coined the term the remediation trap.
Because these students arrive on a university campus completely lacking basic mathematical and grammatical skills.
Yes. The college literally cannot place them in credit-bearing courses. They evaluate them and realize, we can't put you in college algebra. So they are forced to enroll in remedial high school-level math and English classes.
So they are paying college tuition or using federal Pell Grants to learn what they should have learned in the 9th grade.
Yes. And high percentages of these students get permanently stranded in these non-credit courses.
Oh, man.
The coursework doesn't count toward their degree. It drains their financial resources. And a massive portion of them simply drop out, leaving with debt and absolutely no real workforce skills.
Okay, but what about the ones who do survive? I mean, the ones who push through the remediation, play the game, and actually manage to graduate with a bachelor's degree, they must be fine, right?
You'd think so, but the outcomes for college graduates are still deeply concerning when measured objectively.
Really?
Yeah. We could look at the PIAC data. That's the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. This is a universally trusted, large-scale assessment that tests working-age adults on practical, real-world cognitive tasks.
So how does PIAC actually test adults? It's not like they're making a 30-year-old sit in a gymnasium with a number 2 pencil taking an algebra test.
No. PIAC assesses how well adults can process information in a functional environment. So for numeracy, they might give an adult a chart of mileage reimbursement rates and ask them to calculate the total expense for a specific multi-leg business trip.
Okay.
For literacy, they might ask them to read a complex workplace safety manual and identify the correct procedure for a specific hazard.
So just practical, everyday corporate tasks.
Very standard stuff. And the data shows that between the 2012 to 2014 assessment cycle and the 2023 cycle, the average literacy and numeracy scores for U.S. adults actually decreased.
Wow.
We are actively producing college graduates who score at or below basic proficiency in quantitative problem solving and critical reading.
So bringing this back to the corporate world, what happens when these graduates who have been tasked along through a system of grade inflation, survive the remediation trap, and hold a degree but lack functional numeracy, show up for their first day of work at a Fortune 500 company?
Well, the surveys from major employer associations answer that question pretty brutally. Organizations like DensoE, that's the National Association of Colleges and Employers, and the AAC&U, they conduct regular surveys tracking employer satisfaction with recent graduates.
And what do they find?
There's a massive, persistent disconnect between how prepared students think they are and how employers rate them.
Because the numbers and the sources are staggering. Over 70% of employers rate high school graduates as deficient in English writing and reading comprehension.
Yep.
And even more alarming, less than 50% of employers rate recent college graduates as proficient in critical thinking and quantitative skills. Less than 50%.
The pipeline is delivering a product that the end user, which is the corporate employer, considers fundamentally defective.
You know, it reminds me of a construction site. Imagine you hire a crew to build a custom house.
Okay.
You hire them based on their resumes, which are stamped with all these great credentials claiming they are master builders, but they show up to the dirt lot on day one and none of them know how to read a tape measure.
Okay.
They don't understand basic fractions, so they can't cut the wood to the right length. And worse, the foreman you hired to oversee the site doesn't know how to check their math either.
Yeah.
They just start nailing boards together because it looks like a house. But eventually, that structure is going to collapse under its own weight.
That construction analogy perfectly illustrates the internal reality of our third major focal point, the corporate quality control crisis. Because what you just described with the tape measure and the unverified boards, that is the day-to-day operational nightmare happening inside massive institutional employers right now.
From the outside, a major bank or a global tech firm looks like an invincible, well-oiled machine. You know, they have the beautiful glass headquarters and the slick marketing. But the sources suggest that internally, the gears are completely grinding to a halt.
The internal friction is immense. And it stems directly from this decades-long educational deficit. Because foundational skills like mathematical logic, reading comprehension, and the ability to sustain attention, as the NEA warned about, has severely eroded, corporate training paradigms have had to shift dramatically over the last 20 years.
How so? Because you can't just ignore the fact that your employees can't do the work.
No, you can't. But companies stopped trying to teach fundamental principles and shifted almost entirely to teaching interface operations.
Interface operations. What does that actually look like in practice for a typical white-collar worker?
It means teaching an employee how to click a specific sequence of buttons within a software platform without requiring them to understand the underlying math, logic, or database structure.
Oh, I see.
Take a junior marketing analyst or financial associate. They might know the exact 5 buttons to click in Salesforce or Tableau to export a weekly revenue report. They drag the file into Excel, run a macro they inherited from their predecessor, and email the result to their boss.
But they don't actually know how the numbers are generated.
Exactly. If a data variable breaks, if a column header changes in the raw export, or if an unusual edge case appears in the market, they have absolutely zero diagnostic ability.
Because they don't know the math.
Right. They cannot troubleshoot the problem because they do not understand what the software is actually doing. They are rote operators. They know the sequence, but they lack the substance.
So the moment the macro breaks, they just throw their hands up and say, well, the system is down, I can't do my job.
Or, much more dangerously, they don't realize it's broken at all.
Oh, that is terrifying.
It is. When employees lack the fundamental mathematical logic to look at a data set and intuitively catch their own errors, an organization develops what is known as the accountability gap.
Meaning nobody is actually accountable for the accuracy of the work being produced.
It fosters a pervasive toxic culture of ship it and let someone else fix it. Workers routinely push unverified, broken, or mathematically nonsensical work up the chain of command.
Just to get it off their desk.
Exactly. Their critical thinking and self-auditing skills have atrophied to the point of non-existence. A junior analyst doesn't look at a spreadsheet claiming the company sold 10 million units in a single zip code and think, wait, does this number actually make logical sense given our historical volume?
Right, because 10 million is absurd.
Right, but they simply trust whatever output the machine spits out and forward the email.
But wait, shouldn't management catch that immediately? I mean, if an analyst sends up a report that is off by a factor of 10, isn't that the entire point of having middle managers and quality assurance teams? Like, the foreman is supposed to check the work.
And this brings us to a highly alarming realization about the management layer itself. If we look back at that NEA study from 2004, the teenagers who were in high school during that initial recorded drop in analytical reading are now 38 to 40 years old.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
They aren't the entry-level hires anymore.
No. They are the middle and upper management. The individuals educated within a decaying, grade-inflated system have matriculated into the leadership ranks.
That is wild to think about.
When the management layer is populated by people who themselves lack foundational logic and deep subject matter expertise, the entire organizational structure begins to fail.
So the foreman who doesn't know how to read the tape measure is now running the entire construction company.
And because they lack technical depth, unqualified managers cannot evaluate talent effectively during the hiring process. They hire based on superficial buzzwords and credentialism because they lack the ability to assess actual technical competence.
Right.
More importantly, they cannot enforce quality assurance because they literally do not recognize bad, illogical output when it crosses their desk, and they certainly cannot mentor junior staff to improve.
Which means the friction inside the company just multiplies exponentially. You have junior staff making basic errors and senior staff who don't know how to catch or correct them.
It creates immense hidden drag on the corporate balance sheet. Organizations become paralyzed by constant fire drills, broken software implementations, critical security vulnerabilities, and skyrocketing internal training costs. I mean, they are spending millions trying to remediate basic literacy and numeracy skills that their employees should have mastered in high school.
Okay, let's pull these three massive threads together. You have a shadow labor market where 24% of the potential workforce is permanently detached, largely sidelined due to a severe skill mismatch. You have a 30-year documented educational decline highlighted by the NEA, the ACT, and PIAAC, resulting in a workforce that cannot perform basic logic or self-auditing. And you have a corporate environment drowning in the friction of broken work, overseen by an unqualified management layer that is a product of that same failing pipeline.
When you view the landscape through that integrated lens, the current actions of major institutional employers start to make complete rational sense.
Executive leadership looks at this cascading mess. They realize they are bleeding money on errors and remediation, and they know they cannot fix the corporate culture through traditional human resources initiatives because the managers they would have to rely on to execute that fix are themselves part of the skill deficit.
Which is why AI adoption in 2026 is no longer just a cool technological initiative. It isn't a simple cost-cutting measure designed to boost quarterly stock prices. AI is an executive escape hatch.
An escape hatch.
It is the market's pragmatic, natural, and inevitable response to an accelerating human skill deficit. For these corporations, AI appears to be the only way out.
The only way out. That is a heavy, almost dystopian conclusion. But the math makes sense when you look at the time dilemma. If a Fortune 500 CEO wakes up today and says, this is unacceptable, we need to fix this organically. We need to partner with universities, overhaul the curriculum, and rebuild the human talent pipeline from the ground up.
Yeah.
How long does that actually take?
To overhaul primary, secondary, and higher education methodologies and wait for a new generation of rigorous, literate graduates to enter the workforce, you are looking at a minimum timeline of 15 to 20 years.
And in a hyper-competitive, globalized market, No enterprise can afford to pause their operations for 2 decades while the educational system sorts itself out.
Impossible.
They simply cannot absorb the high error rates, the massive friction, and the exorbitant training costs of an underskilled workforce for 20 years. If they try, they will be outmaneuvered by competitors and go bankrupt.
Therefore, they are forced to implement AI as a mitigation tool today. And we see this structural feedback loop playing out in two distinct ways. First, there is mitigation at the bottom of the organizational chart. Enterprises are using AI as a digital crutch for entry-level work.
Instead of spending 6 months trying to remediate a new college graduate just so they can write a coherent professional email, format a basic data report, or summarize a meeting, the company just deploys an AI agent to do it instantly.
Because the software does not suffer from baseline literacy or numeracy errors. An AI agent doesn't get tired, it doesn't complain about the work, it adheres strictly to complex formatting rules, and it universally standardizes output.
Right.
Executives are actively engineering human intervention out of the loop at the bottom rungs of the company to bypass the entry-level skill gap entirely.
If you are listening to this and you have been feeling that intense squeeze at work, maybe you're seeing junior job postings completely vanish from job boards, or you're surviving layoffs but feeling immense pressure to do the work of 3 people, or your CEO just announced a vague strategic restructuring.
Yeah.
This is exactly why. You aren't just competing against a clever algorithm, you are caught in the crossfire of an executive bypass. They are routing around a broken talent pipeline.
But the critical dynamic to understand is that AI's impact is not confined to the bottom of the org chart. Once an enterprise deploys that infrastructure to fix entry-level execution failures, the technology scales rapidly upward. And this is what causes the collateral displacement of high-skilled, highly competent knowledge workers.
Wait, I have a hard time buying that connection. You're saying these high-end senior professionals are losing their jobs to AI because of a skill deficit, because these are the smartest people in the room.
Right.
If AI is just a tool being used to fix a lack of basic skills at the bottom, to fix bad grammar and poor math, why are highly credentialed senior software engineers, corporate paralegals, and veteran financial analysts panicking about their jobs? They aren't the ones failing high school reading tests.
That is the exact paradox of the current labor squeeze. The senior professionals are not being replaced because they are incompetent. They are being displaced because of what economists call the economics of margin and the 10x worker effect.
Break down the economics of margin for me. What does that actually mean in a corporate budget?
So the economics of margin refers to the marginal cost of producing one additional unit of output. At the upper end of the talent spectrum, AI adoption is not about replacing bad staff. It is entirely about leverage and headcount compression.
Okay.
Let's use software engineering as a prime example. An AI coding assistant doesn't independently write an entire software platform and replace an engineering department overnight.
Right. It still needs a human to guide it and verify the architecture.
Correct. What the AI does is drastically, exponentially increase the capacity of a single, highly skilled senior developer. Historically, if a company needed to build a new product feature, they might need a team of 5 engineers. The senior developer designs the architecture, and 4 junior or mid-level developers write the routine code, run the tests, and write the documentation.
But now, with an AI coding assistant handling the routine generation, testing, and documentation,
One senior developer can do the work that previously required all 5. The margin shifts radically. For the cost of one senior salary plus a monthly AI subscription, the company gets the output of 5 humans. The organization simply needs fewer skilled positions overall to achieve the same or greater productivity.
so the collateral loss occurs because high-level headcount is mathematically compressed. The 4 mid-level engineers who are let go by companies like Robinhood or Chime aren't necessarily bad at their jobs.
Not at all.
They might be incredibly smart and competent, but they are mathematically redundant. The margin of productivity has shifted so far that the company literally doesn't need them to hit their goals.
It is a devastating two-sided market impact. At the bottom, jobs are disappearing because humans are being intentionally bypassed due to structural incompetence and high remediation costs.
Right.
At the top, jobs are disappearing because highly competent humans are being supercharged by AI, making their mid-level peers redundant.
That is the structural feedback loop in its final form. Poor education drives systemic unemployability at the base level, which forces companies to adopt AI just to survive the friction. But once the AI is in the door, it supercharges the top tier, which in turn accelerates the displacement of the highly skilled workers in the middle.
It demands that we look far beyond the simplistic headlines of tech company X lays off 10% of staff.
Right.
What we are witnessing is a fundamental structural transformation of how intellectual capital is valued and deployed in the American economy.
It's a profound and frankly sobering reality check. It completely reframes every piece of economic data we see.
Yeah, it really does.
We always like to leave you with a final provocative thought, something to mull over on your commute or explore on your own as you look at your own industry. And looking at all this interconnected data, the 24% ShadowStats detachment, the 30-year NEA reading decline, the corporate AI escape hatch here is what is genuinely keeping me up at night.
Let's hear it.
If companies use AI to entirely bypass the entry-level training grounds because new graduates lack basic skills, if we structurally eliminate the junior analyst, the junior coder, the paralegal, the apprentice, how on earth will society produce the next generation of senior human experts?
That is the existential question facing every knowledge-based industry right now.
We are rapidly creating a two-tiered reality. We are going to have automated systems doing all the heavy lifting and routine work, overseen by an increasingly small elite group of true domain experts who audit the machines. But every single senior expert alive today got to that level by doing junior level work for years.
Exactly.
They learned their craft by doing the boring, routine, foundational tasks that AI is now taking over. They made mistakes, they learned the logic of the databases, they read the long-form documents. If those bottom rungs of the career ladder are destroyed because the current crop of graduates can't be trusted to do them, the bridge from novice to master is gone forever. Where do the senior experts of 2040 come from?
If you cut off the apprenticeship pipeline to solve a short-term competency crisis, you eventually starve the executive suite. Okay. It is a generational problem we have not even begun to solve.
It's exactly like staring at that medical monitor we talked about at the beginning. The machine is beeping steadily. The U3 numbers look incredibly healthy. The corporate profit margins might even look fantastic in the short term as AI cuts payroll costs. But if you look closely at the patient on the table, at the educational pipeline, the baseline literacy of the population, and the structural integrity of the future workforce, the system is in critical condition.
Well said.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a close look at the talent pipeline and the entry-level roles in your own industry, and we'll see you next time.